In a far-off southern continent characterized by blazing hot desert, fertile, life-giving rivers, and dominated by a relentless sun, lies a country without comparison: Egypt. From the barren mountainous landscapes of the Sinai to the teeming metropolis of Cairo, the diversity of this country is boundless. With the heartbeat of a vibrant marketplace ruling trade, the giant bazaar's explosive color and variety tantalizes the senses. The River Nile, coursing from the city gates, delves deep into the Sahara, carving a kilometer-wide strip of verdant green which passes through centuries of ancient history. From a tiny rivulet born over 5,000 years ago, there grew an astounding culture, the like of which will never be seen again. Join us on this spectacular journey through the miracle which we call Egypt. Our journey starts in the region where several thousand years ago a man led his nation out of slavery into the Holy Land. Moses' journey out of Egypt is littered with miracles and legends which mark the history of the stunning Mount Sinai. The sun rises above this spiritual place, astounding us with its panoply of color. The Sinai Peninsula lies in the east of Egypt, on the border between Africa and Asia. This peninsula is characterized by desert and its vast chain of mountains. Mount Sinai, also known as Mount Moses, is found in the south of the peninsula and climbs to a height of 2,285 meters, the second highest mountain in Egypt. As dawn breaks, it touches the summit of the mountains. The multitude of peaks are still shrouded in mist till long past daybreak. But even now, there are often large groups of people gathering at the Holy Mount. These people are pilgrims who started their journey many hours before at the river base, climbing to the summit in order to celebrate the traditional rising of the sun. At the very top of the mount sits the Chapel of St. Moses, also called the Chapel of the Holy Trinity. The exterior is surprisingly simple, given that the legend of Moses receiving the tablets of the Ten Commandments from God happened here. The chapel roof boasts a massive bell on which are written praises to God, doxology, in Greek. Above the bell, a small sign in dozens of languages declares peace on earth and goodwill to all men. At the foot of the mountain lies one of the oldest Christian abbeys in the world, the Abbey of St. Catherine. Built between 548 and 565 BC, the abbey is named after Catherine of Alexandria, one of the most important saints in religious culture. The saint was born a princess from Cyprus who became a martyr in the 4th century AD on account of her unwavering belief. The abbey was built on top of her mortal remains. Most pilgrims are drawn by the legend of Moses. But St. Catherine's Abbey has also drawn large crowds from long ago due to its holy realm. The Abbey's library stores over 6,000 manuscripts of Christian doctrines. This is matched only by the Vatican itself. Another rarity are 2,000 icons, still partly in existence since the 9th century. This stunning collection was able to survive not only due to the monks' diligent care, but in particular due to the unusually isolated location. In all the centuries of its existence, the abbey has never been plundered, making it one of the only Christian sanctuaries in history to survive in its original form. Moses' presence emanates from the holy chapel of the thorn bush, which preserves the legend of God showing himself to Moses as a burning bush. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a fiery blaze of the bramble, and he saw that the bush was burning in the fire and was not consumed. God, who presents himself in Hebrew as Yahweh, in the encounter with Moses, promises he will free the nation of Israel from Egypt's captivity and to lead it into the holy land of Canaan, which in our days is known as Israel. After 10 days of extreme endurance and separating the ocean to pass through, Moses eventually led the nation of Israel to Mount Sinai. He reached the top of the mountain and received the 10 Commandments of God. Like Moses, we will submit ourselves to the desert. The largest part of Egypt is dominated by the vast Sahara. Here you can see the entire spectrum of an extreme environment, from the spiky, unforgiving rock formations to the undulating, ever-changing dunes overlooked by the burning fire of the sun. The Sahara covers most of Egypt, but the regions differ wildly within this vast landscape. To the left of the upper River Nile stretches the Libyan Desert. The right bank of the Nile covers just the eastern desert. To the north of the Libyan Desert lies the Wadi al-Hitan, one of the most important archaeological finds in terms of fossils. The desert is characterized by one element: its terrible heat. It's not unusual to find temperatures climbing to over 60 degrees. Equally extreme is the rapid fall in those figures when the air cools down quickly once out of the sun. In winter, temperatures reaching below zero are not uncommon. But easily the most dangerous aspect of this climate is the dry atmosphere and the unexpected scorching heat. Despite the scarcity of water in this hostile environment, it is still possible to track signs of life in the extreme desert. Crisscrossing the Sahara are dozens of riverbeds, once fed by water but now long since dried out. But as the wadis still carry water when rain falls in the mountains, they still draw clusters of nomads who need to cross the desert. The apparent peace of the wadis is deceptive. With sudden thunderstorms in the mountains, the water levels can rise dramatically, even putting travelers at risk of drowning. The primeval ocean covered the entire continent, Tethys, 40 million years ago. This accounts for the remains of ancient mammals often found here. The Egyptian Wadi al-Hitan, the Valley of the Whales, gives its name to the host of discovered whale skeletons. Most of them are fossilized remains of the now extinct Basilosaurus, also known as king lizard. Similar to the swordfish, this predator whale survived on a diet of small fish. These fossils show the remains of hind legs, which proves the theory that whales are the ancestors of all animal species. east of the Sahara lies the Red Sea. Its name may derive from the Persians, who gave all cardinal directional points a distinctive color. This sea marked their most southerly point, which became the Red Sea. The north point was named the Black Sea. The Red Sea is the only sea which does not have a natural inflowing river. Instead, there's a sea gate in the south which connects to the Indian Ocean. Due to its isolated location, the level of salinity is very high and makes the water clearer than most other seas on this continent. This makes the Red Sea perfect for diving tours, making it a favorite with tourists. In this vast desert landscape, there is some respite in the form of gurgling oases which allow for some life to exist in this wilderness. From the beginning of time, these oases have been vital for the survival of the indigenous desert tribes. From the outside, no more than a small rock pool sheltered by a couple of sparse palm trees, whole cities could survive off the underground water supply hidden beneath the sand. The majority of oases have their source in a deep underground basin stemming from below sea level. The groundwater collects in these pools and comes to the surface as a small lake or stream. A variety of species of plants and trees thrive here, from deciduous trees to palm trees, and typically reed grasses close to the bubbly springs. The largest oases are the ones at Fayum Basin, Al-Bahariya, and the valleys of Farafra. But despite these abundant waterholes, they are insignificant compared to the free-flowing Nile coursing through Egypt in snaking tributaries. Finally, at the apex of the Nile, it gathers towards the Mediterranean Sea, widening its delta from Cairo to Alexandria. Imagine a long journey through the fierce conditions of the desert. Every drop of water would be valued. At last we reach the mighty Nile. This is the longest river on earth and was the life source for ancient Egypt. The Nile begins at the junction where the White and Blue Nile meet at Khartoum. On the fertile banks of the Nile, lush vegetation sprawls 2 to 3 miles wide, creating a green swathe through the desert. Small settlements have grown up around these date palm oases along the entire river. Annual flooding guarantees a prolific fertilization of the soil. The vivid color of the Nile mud gave its name to the ancient Egyptian state, Kekhmet, the Black Land. Since the building of the mighty Aswan Dam, no flooding has breached the banks. For centuries, the Nile was the thoroughfare for fishermen and later merchant ships. Now it is a flourishing tourist route for luxury passenger ships, ferrying tourists from one exotic Nile city to the next, past its breathtaking ruins. At the end of the delta, the Nile segues into the Mediterranean Sea, gathering at the metropolis of Alexandria, where our journey is leading us. Alexandria is located on the Mediterranean coast and is the second biggest city in Egypt after Cairo. In its checkered history, the city's been a royal capital of the successors of the pharaohs and home to 2 impressive buildings, the Lighthouse of Pharos and the impressive Library of Alexandria. Since its foundation, water has played a central part in the city of Alexandria. Today, the harbor is the largest in Egypt and one of the biggest in Africa. The harbor, which was mostly known as a shipping port, became famous outside Egypt due to a huge trawl of artifacts which were salvaged from the docks in recent years. The ships belonging to ancient family businesses carry on regardless of their famous home, carefully navigating through the narrow shipping lanes. On the bank lie more ships waiting to sail or being refurbished. Many vessels from past eras of seafaring are shored up on the strand, whilst new boats are built just a few yards away. A few hundred yards away at the industry harbor of Alexandria, they build container ships destined to travel all over the world. Many of those who have not found employment as dockers are helping to complete the new ships. They often find themselves working on yachts or passenger ferries. Some of the families have worked at the Strand for generations. In the past, the demand for such boats was much higher than now. This is due to the recent Egyptian rejection of Western intervention, which has made the once booming tourist industry collapse once again. The tourists are not aware of the dockers' huge efforts on the Strand. Instead, they are enthralled by the history of the country and its native tongues. On top of a world-class ruin stands Fort Kite Bay, which watches over Alexandria Harbor. The defensive fortification was built at the end of the 15th century. Before then, it stood on the same spot as the famous Pharos Lighthouse. The lighthouse was built by Ptolemy, the ruler of the leading dynasty. Greek successors to the Egyptian pharaohs around 280 BC. After withstanding centuries of earthquakes, the lighthouse finally collapsed and left behind just its ruins. The stones were eventually reused to build the fortress. The fort has few windows, which makes the inside dank, shadowy, and cold. The high, thick walls are supported by a complicated system of semicircular arches and vaults. This massive and well-fortified construction was primarily built for defense against the Turks. Finally, it was used for defensive purposes and wars, arguably far more than its architects would have imagined. Where today the Egyptian flag flaps proudly on battlements reaching to the sky, back then, at the time of the Napoleonic Wars, guards patrolled on top of the walls and towers. In the inner courtyard, garrisons housed the troops of soldiers. Now, all the small islets and narrow spy holes have been bricked up, no longer used by foreign military, but by nosy tourists who lurk in front of the gates, staring into history. Rising along the Mediterranean coastline is the silhouette of Alexandria. The city with 1,000 facets was built by Alexander the Great in 331 years BC. The city has carried his name ever since. This new city only took a few years to become one of the most important cities in the Mediterranean. With the building of the lighthouse at Pharos and the Great Library, Alexandria's reputation as a sophisticated cosmopolitan city was sealed. But the lighthouse collapsed and the Great Library was consumed by fire. Dozens of natural catastrophes, earthquakes, and floods brought Alexandria to its knees and left it almost meaningless. Today, the city presents itself in a new light. Contemporary architecture of the 19th and 20th century stands between the credentials of the city's Ptolemaic forefathers. A visitor may be anxious that the past will not represent itself more clearly, but if they look, it bursts out in between the modern alleys and side streets. On first impression, the cityscape is heavily influenced by traders, hawkers, and shops who try and tempt you with their fresh goods and produce. Away from the trading district, you'll find all kinds of small parks, carousels, and minor fortifications for your amusement. A touring fun fair is setting up in this part of the town. As soon as it opens, all the kids are excited and storm into the new playground eager to grab the toys. Just a stone's throw away is an animal marketplace. As in other African countries, Egypt has similar traditions, and in Alexandria, the connection between human and animal is still very direct and original. Outside the city walls, herders gathered the animals into flocks to lead them into the center of the town's marketplace. In the shadow of the big municipal housing blocks, you can still find some space and peace and quiet, removing you immediately from the hustle and bustle of Alexandria. Rising 150 feet into the air is the Pillar of Pompeii. This is the largest Roman pillar ever found outside the imperial capitals of Rome and Constantinople, Istanbul. Besides this heirloom of Roman history are the Sphinxes, part of the incredible Egyptian legacy. The pillar's name goes back to the commander Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, despite it actually being built in honor of the Roman emperor, Diocletian. The amphitheater is the second most famous testament to the Roman era. Allowed to remain open and intact, it lies at the city's center after excavation. It is one of the rare amphitheaters which sustained the semicircular form. Apart from being aesthetically pleasing, the amphitheater's design offers a spectacular acoustic advantage. Because of the special build of the spectator-ranked seating, you could hear actors and orators even when they were whispering. Most likely the entertainment was in line with the bread and circuses theme. Gladiator and animal fights took place, as was common in the rest of the country at that time. Around the important archaeological site, more and more ancient buildings have been unearthed. An insight into the spectacular former life of Alexandria. Another place here that attracts many people but has nothing to do with the Romans is the Montaza Palace. Built 100 years ago as a summer residence, it became a feature of Alexandria, which boasts a more bearable temperature than a sweltering Cairo during summer. The architecture of the palace is out of line with the classic Egyptian style. Instead, there is more of a Moorish and Florentine influence, which gives the building rather more of a Mediterranean character. The grand palace, with its fences and lack of crowds, may give the impression that it is closed to the public. In fact, the Montaza Palace has been open to visitors for many years. It offers tourists a wonderful tour, and because of its walls, a breathtaking view from the top ledges of its rising tower. Today, the grounds and gardens of the palace are enjoyed as picnic areas for the lucky inhabitants of Alexandria. symbol of modern Islam rises shiny-domed and dazzling in the daily sun against an azure blue sky. The mosque, at once both a meeting point and a place of religious worship for every Muslim, Islam is the most widespread religion in the Near and Middle East and in the Arabic-speaking world. For years, Egypt was part of the Christian tradition, but has been Islamic for centuries now. Islam has already overcome all geographic borders and influences our day-to-day life in many ways. We can see just in the face of the beautiful cupolas and minarets of the mosque the true impression of Islam. In the beginning of the 7th century, followers across the ancient world declared the Prophet Muhammad the messenger of Allah and founder of the religion of Islam. After the Prophet's death, the new religion spread at an almost unbelievable pace, first in the Far East and then across whole continents, including North Africa and finally into Europe. All these different cultures witnessed the spread of Islam. Alongside this, there emerged many different and unique architectural forms, from mud and clay mosques of the Sudan to the domes of Granada in Spain. Despite their different forms, whatever a mosque appears like on the outside, they all have one thing in common: the minaret. 5 times a day, this tower is climbed by the muezzin. He calls all the believers out to prayer. In addition to the more typical minarets, which carry a pitched roof, you may also see more exotic ones. For example, minarets with staircases on the outside. This type goes back to the Samarra Mosque in Iraq. Just as all mosques have a minaret, likewise the large open space, an internal courtyard, belongs to every mosque. Generally, there is a fountain built in every space which serves the daily ritual of washing. Before every prayer, you have to wash face, hands, and feet. Because of the fountain's deep religious significance, they often have a generous high roof. In front of the Muhammad Ali Mosque in Cairo stands a fountain, the pavilion of which is especially finely wrought. Inside the mosque lies the most important element of the tradition, the mihrab, the prayer corner. In the Sultan Hassan Mosque, this corner is adorned with the finest marble by the most accomplished builders. The praying corner points in the direction of Mecca and shows the supplicant which direction to pray towards. On public and religious holidays, the adjacent minbar is climbed by the mosque's spiritual leader, the imam, in order that everyone can hear him. He stands with his back towards the crowd, facing the mihrab. The circular form of the prayer corner ensures the voice of the imam is thrown out loud and clear back into the room. Mosques do not only serve the purpose of prayer, they are equally important as a place where the social life of the community plays its role. Apart from the glorious prayer room, there are also separate community rooms, especially in old mosques where families spend their spare time talking and worshiping together. Fountains and courtyards are found in almost every mosque, as they have always been part of a mosque's design. Islamic architecture has derived very much from sunnier climates in the globe, and therefore uses a historic interplay between light and dark, shadow and sun. When it grew dark outside, light glowed from an array of lamps with artistically designed cutouts and slits. Chains of night lights wind around mosques at sunset and give a warm, relaxing atmosphere. Throughout all the walls and windows of the mosques, you will not find any pictures of religious themes, unlike in Christian churches. There is no depiction of human figures in the Islamic religion, nor images of the Prophet. Instead, you find quotations from the Quran and calligrams, sayings, and prayers which decorate the walls of God's house. The highest point of the mosque is often decorated with cupolas with huge colorful ornaments and arabesques extending from over the ceilings all the way down to the floor. Cutting through the narrow, thronging streets like a deep ravine, this passageway runs towards the center of Egypt's capital, passing flats, houses, and buildings from all decades of the past century as it merges into the skyline of Cairo. Cairo lies on the right side of the Nile and at the mouth of the fan-shaped Nile River Delta. In Egyptian, the city is called Al-Qahira, meaning the victorious. From being a small stronghold, Cairo grew to being the capital of Egypt and the largest city on the African continent. Taking in the magnificent skyline of the city, one can see Cairo's multitude of minarets and mosques, together with the countless tops of skyscrapers. It is a clash between culture, religion, and a modern lifestyle. The Nile crosses the city like a lifeline. Since Cairo's foundation, the river is an absolute necessity. In addition to the water transport, Cairo has wide roads and an infrastructure that guarantees its modernity and prosperity. Hundreds of thousands travel every day from the suburbs and outskirts to the center of the capital. Perhaps due to the vast amount of people commuting in and out of the city, Cairo has developed a very flexible attitude to traffic regulations. Let's move away from the bustling crowds on the street into the tightness of the alleys. The fascinating bazaar offers goods from all over the country. Some of the shops seem tiny, but each merchant is absolutely convinced of their own products and can delve into the stock, producing incredible treasures like magic. Apart from the array of spices, herbs, and garments, the bazaar also offers more precious items. Some sellers offer bowls and plates made from metal or slate, decorated with ancient calligraphy. Other clever merchants have transformed their stores to make them look like shops on the high street. Fresh produce like meat, fruit, and vegetables are displayed and judged by the critical customers. The choices on the market are vast, and prices can differ wildly from store to store, every store, often with the written prices having no substance at all. Here in the gigantic Bazaar of Cairo, the principle of bargaining rules. Haggling or bargaining can take minutes, but if it's about a valuable piece, it could take much longer. It's pretty much taken as an insult if a customer accepts the first price the seller offers them. Bargaining is a kind of ritual here, as much a part of the sale as the payment. Herbs are the most popular product. Over hundreds of years, herb and silk stalls exported their exotic powders to various European countries. Today, herbs and herbal mixtures are prepared in various small warehouses. The products are milled to begin with. The powder that comes out of the mill is still not fine and aromatic enough to be sold immediately. The powder then needs to be sieved, reworked and sieved again until it is absolutely pure. It will then arrive in huge bags at the market. Outside the city center is a camel market. This traditional ancient market was much more important during the time when caravans traveled through the desert. Many caravans started out in Cairo to travel towards Mecca. The route from Cairo was known as the safest for the believers. Although the traditional routes to Mecca are not in use anymore, the camel market still is very busy today. Overseers watch that the camels stay in their places, close to their sellers. There are many traders here too, so no animals are mixed up. The camels are marked with colors. These camels have been bought and are leaving the camel market for their new home. We're back in Cairo at the Egyptian Museum. It was built in the year 1900 to save the valuable art treasures gleaned from thousands of years of tomb robberies. This museum's collection is considered to be the largest in the world and includes countless artifacts belonging to Egyptian emperors. But not every king of Egypt was a pharaoh. Only in the 17th dynasty, about 1,700 years ago, were Egyptian kings given the title pharaoh. Standing out from the many mummies, the most famous exhibit is the golden death mask of the legendary young king Tutankhamun. This mask consists of 11 kilos of pure gold. What we know about the kings of ancient Egypt comes mainly from tombs and buildings built by the pharaoh in their honor. Unbeknown to the many visitors and followers of Egyptian culture, the oldest evidence of the dynasty lies not hundreds of miles from the heart of the city, but right here at the gates of Cairo. From the Second Dynasty onwards, the suburb of Saqqara was used as burial place for all the Egyptian pharaohs and kings. Two more infamous temple complexes of pharaoh dynasties are located here at the river bend of the Nile: Karnak and Luxor. The most extensive information about Egypt's gods can be found in these huge temple complexes. The largest is the temple city Karnak. Karnak's history goes as far back as 2000 BC. On its vast ground are not only temples for gods, but also for pharaohs, kings, and very often their wives. The biggest temples are for the king of gods, Amun-Re, the god of war, Mont, and the goddess Mut. Religion played a leading role in ancient Egypt. The belief in the ubiquity of the gods was mirrored in the pharaoh, who was seen as the son of the sun god Re. The Egyptian sky, depicting hundreds of gods, was the largest in history. Benevolent gods like the sun god Re and the god of creation Atum stood opposite the gods of destruction like Set, and Apophis. In Karnak is also the largest finished obelisk, standing 90 feet high. Obelisks were seen as the symbol of the rays of the sun god Re, and therefore had huge religious significance. Obelisks were always carved from a single piece of rock, but the finished obelisk could not contain any blemishes or cracks. If a defect was found during the carving, the work was ceased immediately and abandoned. Leading from the temple of Amun used to be an alleyway adorned with countless sphinxes leading up to the legendary temple complex of Luxor. This complex was the annual setting for the Opet festival. On this festival, statues of the gods Amun, Mut, and Khans were taken by boat-like chariots on a procession from Karnak through to the yards and the columned halls onto the road to Luxor. We have learned that this ceremony and strenuous ritual was performed to legitimize the emperor and therefore the maintenance of the Ma'at, the ancient Egyptian world order. The principal belief of the Egyptian era was that this order could only exist through the pharaoh and his execution of rituals like the Opet festival. This was the only way to prevent chaos and the destruction of their mighty empire. Close to the Nile Delta lies the dead city Saqqara. Some of these burial tombs are over 5,000 years old. The name Saqqara is probably a derivation of the name of the god of death, Sokar. He featured in an incredible ritual in which mummies would lose their souls. Saqqara became a burial ground so early in Egypt's history, probably due to its close proximity to Memphis, the original capital of Egypt, just a few miles from here. Here we can see, inside the tomb of Teti, a wall with astounding hieroglyphics. These scripts were probably never finished, as Teti died unexpectedly. The hieroglyphics were meant to lead the king to the realm of the dead. Originally in Saqqara, these murals, still found in many tombs today, used to be drawn on the outside, but gradually they were transferred inside to protect them from the corrosive weather and sandstorms. Next to the ruined chapels rises the Pyramid of Djoser. It represents the belief of life after death and has suffered the ravages of time. On the highest point over the complex stands the oldest witness to the ancient world. There are about 80 pyramids remaining throughout Egypt. The most famous ones are found in Giza, but many more are found in other necropolises around the Nile Delta. Not all of the pyramids were designed to be burial grounds. Some were used as fake graves or cultural palaces. The Djoser Pyramid is one of the first pyramids in Egypt. 4,700 years ago, it was built by the legendary architect Imhotep. The pyramid has 6 steps and is 180 feet high. The form of the pyramid is based on the first mastaba. It consisted of only one stone step. In time, more and more mastabas were built on top of each other, and this is how the first step pyramids evolved. Although from the outside these pyramids differ from the Great Pyramids of Giza, inside all pyramids have these step forms. They only get their comparatively smooth surface from the amount of steps and the type of cladding. Not all finished pyramids are free from defects. The Meidum Pyramid is barely recognizable as a pyramid. It looks more like a multi-level tower. The visible remains are just the core of the old pyramid. Large parts of this pile of rubble used to be part of this pyramid. The Bend Pyramid is the oldest and also the strangest pyramid found in Egypt. Its most obvious feature is the huge bend halfway up. This may be due to problems with stability during the building phase. The Red Pyramid is also an astounding structure. Like the Bend Pyramid, it was built by King Snofruu. As its name indicates, it is characterized by its red coloring. The builders learnt from their experience with the Bend Pyramid and were able to build the Red Pyramid without defect, making it 600 feet high. The most famous and arguably some of the most incredible formations of the Egyptian style are the Pyramids of Giza. They are the only ancient wonders of the world not affected by natural catastrophes. Only a few miles outside Cairo, they are still the most favored destinations for tourists all over the world, as much today as 100 years ago. Here, visitors stand with amazement in front of the pyramids of Merenninos, Khephren, and Cheops. The internal structure of one pyramid could be totally different to another. At the Cheops pyramid, the burial chamber is in the center of the building. Many people claim that the path inside is part of a dark, branched labyrinth, which can only be navigated by the workers who built the pyramid. The curse of the pharaoh is also a legend. This can be said to be confirmed by the empty tomb inside the chamber. Even today, there are many questions surrounding the erection of these stone colossuses. Despite the fact that Egyptians knew of the wheel in their time, all of the heavy stones, often over a ton, were transported without carts or similar transport. The Cheops pyramid, standing at its 350 feet, is the highest building around. Even though this colossal pyramid seems like a wonder in itself, the real wonder was supposed to have happened during the reign of Cheops. A man named Dedi was brought before the king and was able to reattach the head of a dead goose onto its body, making it live again. As a reward, the magician was promised a life of luxury. Stories like this allow archaeologists to examine the culture, beliefs, and intellect of ancient Egypt. The camels wait patiently in the hot desert sand. Although there are plenty of comfortable vehicles which now transport tourists effortlessly to the pyramid sites, camels are still the most popular form of transport. There can be no question. Approaching the pyramids on the back of a swinging ship of the desert. Close to the monumental structures rises another part of Egypt's legacy, the Sphinx. For over 4,000 years, as long as Egypt has existed, the mighty Sphinx has stared into the desert. There are many secrets and legends whispered even today. It is unclear whether it was built as a guardian for a tomb or as a portrait of a king. The most intriguing mystery is perhaps its broken nose. The most common assumption was that the cannons of Napoleon on his Africa crusade destroyed it, but this was proven wrong. It is more likely that a fanatical iconoclast broke off the nose to make a stand against religion or culture. So, since then, the Sphinx watches the burial grounds of the pharaohs without its nose. 3,000 miles further south of Giza are the temples of Abu Simbel, carved out of stone. Originally, the temple complex of Abu Simbel was located where the Nasser Barrier Lake is today. About 50 years ago, the Aswan Barrier Lake was built and threatened to destroy Abu Simbel. In a worldwide campaign, the whole complex was removed, including the original rock, and rebuilt around 600 feet further down the site. Carved in stone, the imperious wife of the pharaoh, Ramses, Nefertari, overlooks the Nile. This temple was built in her honor. At the entrance are two figures of Ramses II. Both the married couple's statues are the same height. This is a symbol of love from Ramses. Usually, the wife of a king has a lower status than the king himself. The temple is not just dedicated to Nefertari, but also to the goddess Hathor. This is emphasized by the Hathor columns inside the temple, which have the faces of the goddess. The center of Abu Simbel is not the temple of Nefertari, but the great temple of Ramses II. His burial place is about 500 feet away from his wife's. Every great temple of ancient Egypt has a huge main entrance. It is called a pylon. At Abu Simbel, the rock itself is the entrance gate. On the edge of the gate are 4 seated statues. Each statue represents Ramses himself. These self-portraits show Ramses' desire to be the same as the gods. This can also be read on the inscriptions on the statues, on which he is described as the son of all emperors, lover of Amun and Atum, and emperor of both countries, Upper and Lower Egypt. Many halls with countless inscriptions and statues of gods are carved into the rock. In one of the halls is a relief that shows scenes of the life of the pharaoh. In the last room of the temple, the sanctuary, are statues of the gods Ta, Amun-Re, Re-Harakti, and in the middle, Ramses himself. From the amazing temple complex of Abu Simbel, we are now on our way to a valley that some might say is even more legendary. The twin statues of the Memnon Colossus guard the street leading to the tomb of the emperors which bears its name, the Valley of the Kings. Back in time, it is said the statues gave out mysterious sounds at dawn. The Valley of the Kings is close to the temple complexes of Karnak and Luxor on the other side of the River Nile. As at Saqqara, this valley contains a multitude of tombs of pharaohs and kings lined up next to each other. Surrounded by mountains and hills, the burial grounds are spread right across the vast valley. Next to this, in the south, lies the Valley of the Queens. These are similar tombs housing the wives of the kings and many senior dignitaries and officials of Egyptian courts. Here, the numerous tombs look unimpressive and seem to merge with the desert sand and dunes. These tombs' plain appearance may have been a ruse to deter thieves, because we now know inside these graves were decorations of the highest order. Not far from the Valley of the Queens is the enormous temple dedicated to Hatshepsut. She was one of the few queens of Egypt who reigned by herself. During her dynasty, many innovative ideas were expounded in architecture and design, and her era is characterized by an exceptionally long period of peace. Her temple is architecturally very different to other temples from the same period. Among its outstanding features are the columned halls that replace the traditional mighty entrance gates. Also, these open out onto vast terraces, giving an affable, friendly, open impression, in contrast to the old, dark and tightly constructed temples of the pharaohs. The balcony that leads over 2 floors contains inscriptions about the life of Hatshepsut. In the right wing are drawings depicting the royal birth of the queen. This is therefore called the Birth Hall. In another hall are drawings about an expedition to a wealthy country which has great treasures such as gold, ebony, and myrrh. Like many other burial places, the grave of Hatshepsut wasn't only dedicated to the queen, but also to some gods, which is why there are chapels and temples with murals in honor of the gods Anubis and Hathor. Now we are leaving the death temple of the queen and making our way back to the Valley of the Kings. Despite all precautions, the graves of this infamous valley have been victims of countless grave robbers. And even after detailed explorations and additional digs, the looting decreased only a little. In 1922, the biggest find in the history of the valley was made: the grave of Tutankhamun. Because the entrance of the grave was buried for a long time down a long passage, all the treasures of the pharaoh remained untouched, as well as the legendary golden death mask. The graves of the pharaohs have always fascinated local people. But there are no traces or records of the ancient workers or of ordinary citizens of Egypt, with one exception: the Deir el-Medina, which is a workers' village in the Valley of the Kings. Here there used to live artists and workers who built and painted the graves and artifacts. Many shards have been found between the ruins, often depicting writing called ostraka. These testaments were a sensational source of information about the lives of the ordinary people in ancient Egypt. In the village, we have found not only remains of houses, but also of little chapels and graveyards. Sometimes the quality of the mural paintings of these graves can match even the more famous paintings in the graves of the pharaohs themselves. Not far from the Valley of the Kings, there is the Ramesseum. The temple was not always heavily damaged like today. Originally, it looked more like a fortress than a cult site in honor of Ramses II. Now, only a few high walls remain as evidence of the military character of this funerary temple. Similar to the temples of Abu Simbel, there are many statues of Ramses II carved into the rock. Also, part of the grave, there was apparently a holy lake and further outbuildings. But here time has done more damage than to other sites. This can be clearly seen on degraded pillars or on the remains of pharaoh statues. Egypt. Thousands of years of ancient history. Scores of events and colossal evidence of human accomplishments. Here are the last wonders of the world, the remaining ruins of a bygone era of the kings of the desert. The lights of the big cities are shining over the same ground where once miles of processing worshippers prostrated themselves before the pharaoh. Now over the land of the pharaohs, over the scorching deserts, mosques, and sprawling metropolises that comprise modern Egypt, the sun finally sets behind the impressive pyramids, leaving us once again reflecting, always in awe.